Hey, everybody, this is Perch. Got an email, but first, some other business in another email first to get to. Fantastic for Audio Comics. So I promoted this YouTube channel in the past. If you haven't get a look, Fantastic for Audio Comics. And I'll just read this quick note from the creator. It says, Perch, I really appreciate the love you gave to my YouTube channel in the past. I just wanted to share that I posted my final Fantastic Four video recently, completing that whole 1983 story arc with the trial of Reed Richards. Pretty pleased with the final entry. Hope you're doing well. So go check that out, please. Fantastic for Audio Comics. It's cool. It's something on YouTube. It's not, look, it's a nice break. You don't get to hear any problems with the industry or culture war kind of stuff. It's just comics. It's just pure unadulterated comics. So I think go check that out. The guy has done a great job with it. I was not aware it was ending. So I'm sorry. I'm sad to see that. But hopefully some other people can actually take the cue from that channel, because I think it's a pretty cool concept and pretty, I'm not undermining it or underselling it here, but relatively easy to do. Now the person, the guy who does the Fantastic Four channel has a great voice and a great style, so you might not be able to do it at that quality level, but I would still, try it. Why not? It's some good stuff. And now that we've got that happy, good thing out of the way, we can get back to problems. So that's why everybody comes to the show. It is funny. People, when they're talking about this channel, I can generally tell kind of the general bias where they're coming from. For what it's worth, this channel is fairly neutral. It's neutral positive, if anything. And do I talk about some of the issues in the comics? Sure. Do I hold the belief that there's a lot of retcon silliness that goes on, usually to satisfy the current needs and urges of whoever's writing it? Yeah, I do believe that's true. That doesn't mean comics are bad. It's just uncomfortable truths. And it's always funny to me. People can definitely do uncomfortable truths from their perspective, but when they have to take it, it's like a lot of people are very good at giving feedback. They're very, or ready to give feedback, I should say, not good at it, but very, very, very hard to take feedback, to accept it. But anyway, the problems, we're back to problems again. So problems with the comics in a nutshell. Let's read this mail. Let's see if this person is just bitching or has a good point. It says, hey, Perch. So I went to my local comic store today and picked up my books, and two books, Transformers number 8, Avengers number 14, that my 10-year-old son has been reading. I asked my son if he was enjoying the Avengers. He said, not really. I asked, what's wrong with it? He said, it's kind of boring. I then explained to him that a lot of the old guys, like Dad, feel that way about a lot of comics today. I stopped reading the Avengers with this latest renumbering, but I kept buying the book for him to see if he was ready to graduate to the main 616 continuity. Every month I check in with him to see if I want to start reading the Avengers again. He then unsolicited offered, yeah, and adults have to buy the books. It's not like the kids can afford them like when you were a kid. And the only place to buy them is 2 hours away. I can't walk there. The kid then stood up and talked about climate change and how it made him sad. No, I'm kidding. The meme of, well, it's not a meme, but the kid who has truce. I believe this story. For once, I do believe this story. My daughter has said something similar, particularly a location thing. A lot of us focus on the money, and don't worry, we will. But the how to get comics is actually on kids' minds. So my daughter's like, if I want to play a game, if I want to, read, I was asking her, why are you into, the graphic novels that you can get at Target, the Babysitter Club and the, Dog Man, kind of that whole, circle of graphic novel books for kids. And I was basically like, you could read. She's actually reading way, way above her grade level. So I'm like, you can read, more complex stuff. What about comics? And she's like, I don't even know where the comic store is. Like, you always drive. It's hours away. These books are at every grocery store and every Target and every kind of, like, the dollar store has these books. I mean, they're easy to find, and I just can't get there. But anyway, so I do believe this story. Within 3 minutes, my 10-year-old nailed 3 major problems with the comic book industry. Number 1, they're boring. Number 2, they're too expensive. Number 3, they're too hard to buy. And by this I mean location. Says, I get the big two, want to move on from my generation, but what generation are they writing these books for if a 10-year-old finds the Avengers boring? How can a 10-year-old understand the major issues with comic books and the paid professionals can't? Good question, good summary. And I think it hits the nail on the head quite well of the problems. And I think that is it. We'll do boring last because, boring is subjective for what it's worth. But, I mean, there's enough evidence to believe there's just not a lot of excitement or not enough excitement in comic books today. But let's start with the price. So, yeah, it's true. It was feasible when a lot of us were kids that we could spend, pocket money on comics that, we're running around. It's not like, I think the trap for a lot of people when they look at this is they think about what collectors, what whales are currently buying in comic stores, and you're walking out with $40, $50 worth of stuff and a giant pile of comics. But, and this is why I've always rejected the Wednesday Warrior thing. Yeah, I get it for collectors. But when you were a kid, you would go to wherever you could find comics. And in that case, they were everywhere, gas stations and grocery stores and everywhere. And you could buy a comic, and maybe you bought a comic on Thursday, maybe you bought a different comic on Saturday because you had money then, and it was, you had $1 and you could buy comics. And so the price is just to the point where it's no longer a simple purchase for a kid. It's no longer in kid zone money. And, yeah, I mean, I'm apparently a very cheap dad, but I would give our, daughters an allowance and they get cash. But that cash it's everything. It gets eaten up very, very fast. If my younger daughter wants a ribbon for her hair or just some kind of bow, if she's begging us to go to Claire's, one of the worst places on the planet as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, she's begging us to go there, and it's still like, $6 later, she's walking out with a bow. And if I'm giving her allowance like $5 for something, and it's tough. It's tough for her to do that. And they've done lemonade stands, the classic kind of kid stuff, and they'll go out and they'll sell things and everything else. And they may come out with like $25 worth of, cash between them or, each. And, there again, they're like, okay, well, we want to buy a plushie is kind of thing number one. And then, my daughter wants to buy one of these Babysitter Club books. That's $6, $7. And it's just, it like comics weighing in at $3.99, $4.99. It's no longer something that you could casually buy as a kid. I get inflation and then everything is more expensive, and it is. But comic books used to be something you could fit into the corners of your kid budget, and it's just not anymore. And then the location we talked about earlier, that is a huge factor. You can't just, make it to a comic shop. You can't just, bike down the street. I mean, some of you can, I guess. It depends on if you're lucky enough to live near one. But in general, you don't have one nearby. And they're not in a lot of stores. So you're really having to go to a specialty place. And so that requires, as a kid, either luck, you happen to be near one, or such an alarming amount of commitment that, it's just not feasible for a kid to do that. And so the location is a big deal. You're now, in addition to being dependent on your parents for money to actually buy this stuff, you're now also dependent on your parents for, driving you there, or getting you to the place where you got to buy the comics. So, I mean, all of these things stack to make it an inconvenience, and things that are an inconvenience just don't survive. So that's the problem. And then you get to boring. With boring, I again, it is subjective. But I mean, there's definitely truth to some of that. I think, you put it this way. There are sites, AIPT, or Bleeding Cool or The Beat or others that are, self-proclaimed, we are all in on comics. And yet, if you go to those sites, you will not find a bunch of articles talking breathlessly about the next storyline. This is always one of the things that kills me about places like the Mary Sue or Jezebel or places like that. They want to promote, Captain Marvel and women in comics and how cool it is, except where's the article about what's going on in Captain Marvel? What is going on in Captain Marvel? At this moment, there should be lots of things to write about, right? I mean, she's leading the Avengers, so she is in command of the Avengers, And and she's got her own solo title doing something. She had a limited series book where she had the nega bands, and like there's multiple places where we could talk Captain Marvel, but these sites don't do it. Why? Because I don't think they're reading the comics. And why are they not reading the comics? Because they're not interesting. I mean, that's my theory. Maybe it's because they're kids and they can't they can't drive to the comic shop or afford them. Maybe that's why. I don't know. I don't know what kind of staff they're hiring over at the Mary Sue, but the point is, like, where are all the articles? You would expect, diagnosis of, here is this speculation. Is this villain actually this person? And was this cameo over here going to lead to something bigger? I mean, you'd expect articles like that. You used to have articles like that. Back when, not even like the distance past. If you go into when Bendis was writing the 2 X-Men books, which is not that long ago, there were articles speculating on, are the young X-Men going to get back to their home, or is the Beast ever going to pay for these crimes, or just a bunch of detail in there around the characters and what might happen, and speculation on storylines they're going to write, and analysis of what was going on in the comics. And today there's not. I mean, I'm sure there are somewhere. But these sites, the closest they get is that they'll interview. It's like, we've got Jed MacKay, let's talk to him. And, and then they'll talk to Jed MacKay. And, Jed's over there like, yeah, I was interested in doing this and this. And you kind of get a vague sense that the interviewer is reading the comics, but not really. And if you're not in an interview state, like, very, very rarely. The only time I really see articles talking about comic plots is when they can do some kind of clickbait out of it, like, spoiler, just killed an Avenger. Which one was it? And then in the recent issue of Blood Hunt, Blade did this to Doctor Strange. It's like, all right, that's clickbait bullshit. I mean, it's an event, and we know this isn't going to stick and everything else. So then you just think the writer is stupid. But the point is, I would think, if the interest was there, if the comic stories were there and people were into it, we would see a lot of articles and analysis and Facebook threads and Twitter threads, but you don't. I mean, that, to me, that's the canary in the coal mine. And I'm not, maybe you're enjoying the comics. Okay, then my question is for you. Why aren't you talking about it? Why aren't you speculating on what can happen? That feels off, right? I mean, hell, these sites desperately need writers. Apply to the Mary Sue. Say, I'm reading these comics. I'd love to do a weekly column talking about what Captain Marvel is up to this week. I mean, go for it. It would certainly be a hell of a lot better than, we went on Twitter and found a bunch of tweets from Man Bros who's saying that Brie Larson should smile some more, and we're going to write a couple pages on that. Like, Christ, who needs that? So, but anyway, a great mail, great point. I do think those are problems with comics. Too expensive, too hard to find, and ultimately the stories aren't landing. And if we're after a new audience, particularly this young kid audience, their bar for entertainment is high. You are competing against YouTube and TikTok and video games and all kinds of things that have immediate gratification. And so if your comics got to be at that level, if they're not, better reverse course and go market to those old guys who are dying off. Anyway, thanks for listening.